Well, hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is Induction Noise. I am Mr. Q, and this is my 2007 Jaguar X-Type Estate diesel. Now, the reason I've got the hood open and the light rigged up is because today I'm going to be attempting to fix one of the most common issues that occurs on this bad boy. So, the 2.2 diesel that's in this car is, generally speaking, pretty reliable. Everyone seems to think that they're pretty bulletproof. But the one thing that does go wrong on them is a turbo actuator failure. The funny thing is, it's not actually the turbo actuator itself that fails on these engines. What happens is that the vanes that are controlled by the turbo actuator get gummed up with all the crap that comes through the exhaust. So it gets sooty and oily and just gross and clogged up with a whole bunch of crap. And when that happens, the turbo actuator, which is just an electronic servo motor, is no longer able to move those vanes. So in the car, you'll experience that as a slight loss of power. You'll see increase in fuel consumption. You may sometimes see an error warning light come up on the dashboard. In my case, it's just been increased fuel consumption and a loss of power. And like I said, it's not the actual actuator that fails. Because this thing clogs up, it just can't move. And then because it can't move, that can cause the actuator to fail. So before that happens, you want to be cleaning this thing out and making sure that the actuator can actually move the vanes freely. The problem is, I've kind of been avoiding this job because it is a little bit scary. The only way to do this, according to the internet, is either to strip the entire turbo system and exhaust, take it all apart, clean it, put it back together again, which I don't fancy doing, or something called the Mr. Muscle fix, which involves drilling a hole into the turbo housing and using Mr. Muscle oven cleaner to clean the inside of the turbo without removing it. It sounds scary. I think it's going to be scary, but I'm going to give it a go and see if I can get it done. So, if you're up for it, join me, and we'll see if we can get this thing running back the way it should be. Okay, so as you can see, the engine's got this big plastic cover on it, and the turbo itself sits behind the engine over here, under this heat shield cover that's over here. Now, obviously, to get to the turbo and to perform the tasks that we need to do today, first thing we have to do is get these covers off so that we can get access to all the bits that we need access to. This cover's fairly easy. You just grab it on the sides and pull it off. Obviously, the dipstick sometimes gets caught, so I'll take that out first. Just put it to the side. Then we'll pull this off. It's just got some clips that hold it in place. So that comes off, goes to one side, and the dipstick goes back in the hole. I just want to make sure I don't get any crap on it, because obviously I don't want that crap going into the oil at the bottom of the engine. This car is going to be due for a service soon, so stay tuned. We might actually film that as well. Right guys, with the cover removed from the turbo, you can now actually see the exhaust side of the turbine. This is the actual actuator over here on the back of it, operated by this little armature right at the top of your screen. Now the plan is to drill a hole through this part of the casting, which is cast iron obviously, and then to inject through that hole oven cleaner, which will clean those vanes that sit in this part of the housing. this is the part that scares me. Drilling a hole into my turbo housing. So I've got a piece of scrap cast iron down there. Let's have a look and see what I did there. Okay, so obviously this is a scrap piece of cast iron that I've got lying around in the garage, and the more astute amongst you will notice there is a bolt in here, because what I had to do, obviously if you're drilling a hole in the turbo housing, you need to figure out how to plug that hole once you're done. So I've drilled a hole through this cast iron. It actually drills pretty easily compared to stainless steel and stuff like that. But obviously that 5mm hole will need to be filled and closed up once we've done our cleaning. And we're going to do that with a bolt. But obviously we need to cut a thread in that hole so that the bolt has something to grab onto. And I bought a brand new tap and die set specifically for this job, and as you can see, it actually cuts a beautiful thread in the cast iron. So once we've done everything we need to do, that with a little lick of silicone on the thread, well, a specific silicone high temperature thread sealer kind of thing, should close up the hole again and we'll be good to go. Let's do some drilling. Now obviously there's not a hell of a lot of room to maneuver in here. There's a little vacuum reservoir that sort of hangs about in this part of the engine bay, which rather worryingly doesn't seem to be attached to anything, if I'm being brutally honest. But to get the drill in here, I may need to just push this down or out of the way slightly to see if I can get the drill in there at a better angle, because obviously I don't want to drill at too much of a downward angle when what I want access to is all the way in that direction. Let's see how the drill is actually going to fit in here, and we go from there. Okay, it appears I'm through. So, whew, let's hope this works, because there is now a hole in my exhaust. Okay guys, I apologize for the angle of the drilling shot, but unfortunately I thought it was probably more important that I have control of the drill going into the turbo than it was to get the correct camera angle. It's a little bit difficult shooting film whilst you're doing all these things by yourself. So as you can see, this is the metal swarf that came out of the hole. It's actually a lot thicker to drill through than I thought it would be, but I'm through, and as you can see, there is my brand new access hole. Now the cool thing about this little drilling, tapping, screwing maneuver modification that I've been suggested is that it does make this problem serviceable. In other words, every 6 months to a year or so, depending on how much you drive the car, etc., you just simply unscrew the bolt, squirt in the cleaner, screw the bolt back in, and Bob's your uncle. It sort of takes care of itself from there. So next thing, I think I'm going to try and squirt the oven cleaner in there, and I'll show you what that looks like. Right guys, with the hole in the turbo now drilled, your next step is to inject the cleaner. Now the one that everyone on the internet suggests is this. No endorsements or sponsorship or product placement or anything like that. It's just that Mr. Muscle's oven cleaner has a sort of no scrub formula. So the theory behind it is you can just inject it into the thing, it dissolves all the crap, and it blows out the exhaust, essentially. As you can probably tell from the cleanliness of this can, I have previously used this stuff on my intake manifold and the EGR valve of this car, and it does seem to work as directed. The other thing that's nice about this particular cleaner is that it foams up, and obviously without better access than a 5mm hole, you want as much foamy action as you can possibly get in there to fill the space and get to all the nooks and crannies. But obviously a 5mm access hole, you can't spray an aerosol into a 5mm hole and expect it to work. So the theory goes that if you get one of these, which you can find on any WD-40 or Q20 can, which is just a little cap with a straw poking out of it, and you have one of these, which is just a stainless steel drinking straw that fits into my 5mm hole, I should be able to get some extra reach into the turbo housing and get the cleaner where it's actually supposed to go, in theory. Okay guys, so just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to spray a little bit of this cleaner into this little plastic cup so you can see how it actually foams up. You can see there, it goes in and immediately starts filling up the voids, and as you can see, I haven't quite got a seal on my cap yet, so I'm going to have to obviously just push down on that to get it to sit on there properly. But as you can see, it fills up the space. So a couple of seconds, good decent blast of this stuff into the hole should fix the problem. Okay guys, well, I've had to substitute my stainless steel drinking straw for a plastic one because it didn't quite fit into the hole. But there we go, the straw is going into the turbo. It's a little bit fiddly because it still wants to get stuck there. There we go. Past the hole, goes all the way in, and then back about an inch. I'm going to stick the cleaner in there through the straw, and here we go. Let's see if this works. Okay, well, it's definitely gone out the end of the straw and into the turbo. So fingers crossed, that'll do the trick. Well, whilst it's doing its trick, let's tap the hole so that we can put a bolt in it. Right guys, now unfortunately, because of the location of the turbo and everything that's sort of around it, we've run into another problem. As you can see, the tap is in the turbo, but this is the handle that's supposed to turn the tap. And where it is, it would be absolutely impossible for this thing to turn around in that little hole. I think maybe what I should do as a sort of first attempt is to maybe turn this and see if I can just reattach it to the tap every 90 degrees. It's going to be a hellishly long process if I have to take the handle off and reattach it every 90 degrees, but I'd rather do that than ruin my turbo housing and not be able to drive my car on Monday. Right guys, for the final steps, I just have to put this heat shield cover back on. As you can see there, my bolt didn't go quite all the way through, but I actually prefer it that way because it's not sticking into the exhaust as much as it would have done otherwise. This sort of heat shield cover, a bit fiddly, but once it gets into position, it's fairly easy to reattach with two 10mm and one 8mm bolts for some bizarre reason. They are different sizes. There we go. screw these down. And then we'll use this to just tighten them up.
And then switch
the 10mm socket for an 8mm socket.
Put the last screw in place.
And job done. Now the plastic cover, but first, I don't know if you'll recall, but there was this mess of stuff here which I can't quite understand why it was loose in the first place, but this needs to click back onto there, and it all just sort of sits here rather haphazardly, but it is actually secured. And then, last but not least, our plastic cover goes back on. Simply slot it into place and dipstick back in. Slap it down. There we go, all buttoned up. Okay guys, so everything's buttoned back up, but I just want to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So I've taken this little circlip off here. This is the actual turbo actuator, and it has a little servo motor that acts on this armature here. Now previously, if you take the circlip off and you detach this arm, this would have been quite sticky to operate, but now it is light as a feather, moves back and forth smoothly without really much resistance at all, and that's exactly what you want it to do, because now the turbo actuator can freely move this thing around without having to act against all the crap and soot deposits and stuff that the engine tends to leave on the exhaust parts. So I'm going to reattach that, leave it for a bit for that stuff to just work its way into the cracks a little bit more, but that already feels 1,000 times better than it used to, because in fact, truth be told, I've been putting this job off for quite a long time, and the way that I've been putting it off and pushing it back has just been to, every once in a while I'll undo the circlip, wiggle this back and forth and try and use the actual vanes to clear some of the crud out of the way. But this has been far more effective and obviously much more of a permanent solution in the long run. So I'm glad I did this. Let's just hope and see if it works. Okay guys, apologies for the sound, but the battery in the microphone has just died. Everything is now buttoned up. The armature is attached back onto the actuator. So in theory, what we should be seeing now is if I start the car and rev it up, this thing should be moving back and forth quite freely. So let's see what it does. Right guys, well, it looks, fingers crossed, like it's worked. I'm going to take it for a test drive and see what the power feels like. And it actually turned out to be a much simpler and easier job than I thought it was going to be. It only took as long as it did because bad quality tools make it way harder than it really ought to be. I mean, you can see there, let me just try and focus on there. This jaw is completely screwed. That's supposed to make like a diamond shape in the middle, and it actually ends up being more like a triangle. It's going out of focus again, sorry. Trying to focus there, but the camera keeps tracking me. But yeah, this thing absolutely useless. I will be sending it back because I think it's pathetic that after doing one hole, this jaw is completely stripped and buggered. Like I said, I just can't believe that this thing is supposed to be able to tap up to an M12, and it did this tapping one M6 hole. So yeah, get rid of that, and we'll see you in the next one. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave them in the comment section below, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got maintenance work like this going on our own cars. We've got the podcast coming out very soon, if it hasn't already, depending on the release schedule. Obviously the Supra build is ongoing, and we're trying to race to get that ready for a Samola entry for next year. So fingers crossed, we'll be racing soon. Until the next one, guys, stay classy.